Chapter 2. The Spark from the River. On this stormy night, there was a sound that rose louder than the roar of the river and the howling of the wind. The anguished cries of the mother grizzly shook the banks on which she sat. Her great gulping grief seemed to suck the air from the earth. The long guard hairs on her back were sheathed in ice and trembled, creating a bristling litter of small sounds beneath the rage of her grief. When the river had threatened to flood her den, she had turned her back for a few seconds to scan for higher ground. In those seconds, cougars had erupted out of nowhere and made off with her cub, her single cub. She had only grown one this time. All summer and fall she had eaten, fattened herself up, and for what? To have what would most likely be her last-born killed. Now, with her teats still dripping with the milk meant for her cub, she was ready to die. She welcomed the river that she had hoped to escape. Not since the mating time 5 summers before, when a male grizzly had killed one of her cubs to get near her, had she grieved like this. She would not move from the den where she had birthed and suckled the cub. She tipped her massive head toward the moon that watched her like a dead eye, and pleaded with great Ursus, "Take me, take me." The grizzly had lost all sense of time, but the night became darker as the moon slipped down in the western sky. Near dawn, the storm had blown out, leaving dark clouds on the horizon like smoldering ashes. The river flood had reached its peak, but still had not taken the grizzly. A dark sodden clot snagged on her half-submerged hind leg. She shook her foot at the annoying scratching sensation, but when she shook, the clot clung tighter. It made her irritable, and she dragged her paw up onto the bank. She would later wonder what it was that stopped her from reaching forward and simply scraping off the clot. It betrayed no sign of life. The scratching could have been the prickly thorns of a bramble that had become entangled with the flotsam of the racing currents. River trash. That was all, and yet she felt something. She would think of it as a spark. She had seen sparks come from the sky, and sparks struck from rocks when tumbling boulders collided, but she had never imagined a spark coming from a river. A spark from a river, unquenched, undamaged, undiminished, flying upward from the watery turbulence and containing in its minuscule sphere of light the promise of life. So she reached forward and carefully picked up the sodden clump with both her front paws. It didn't squirm. She couldn't see signs of breathing, but it was a cub of some sort, and when it opened its eyes with what seemed great pain, she saw the spark. As the sun lifted over the horizon, she saw its light reflected in the cub's 2 eyes. And then she saw an image that shocked her. It was her own reflection in the eyes of an animal that was not born of her, nor of her kind. "It's a wolf," she thought. "I seek death, and it seeks life." And then she looked up at the sky, searching for the Great Bear constellation. She could not see it, for dawn was breaking, but deep down she knew that this wolf was a message from Ursus, a scolding. She must not think of death. Her time had not come yet. It wasn't an accident that the pathetic pup had fetched up on her leg. It was a gift from the river. "Faolan," she whispered. "I shall call you Faolan." Fay meant both river and wolf, and Lan was the word for gift. "You are my gift from the river," and she gathered him to her chest. The milk giver? The pup smelled the milky traces in the thick fur and nuzzled toward the source, but the closer he got, the more confused he became. It did not seem the same. The smell was different, and the taste as well, and there was a new, frightening sound. The thunderous roar of the river was replaced by a great rhythmic booming, and threaded through the mighty reverberations were gusty bubbling sounds. As the grizzly gently pressed Faolan closer to her teat, the sounds actually shook him. Yet he felt safe. It was a different milk giver, a huge one, many times bigger than the first, and he was hearing the pumping of her heart and the turbulence of her stomach. Gradually, he became used to the sounds. They blended into the rushing of the river, folded into the quieter noises of his own sucking. He sucked. His world became one of milk. Thick, rich milk. He shut his eyes and slept, still sucking. The grizzly looked down on Faolan, and huge tears rolled from the corners of her eyes. "The river spirit brought you to me. There must be a reason. I shall nurse you through this morning into the day and through the night. A spark can become a flame, a fire." She blew her warm, gentle breath onto him. The pup's eyes fluttered, and he sank deeper into dreamless sleep.